Welcome to Boredom Seated. I'm Michael.
I'm Boris, and how are you?
I'm great. And today we're talking about the vampire, its lore, its history, pop culture, and its statistics involving involving 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder 2nd edition. So starting off with the history of vampires, this goes way way back into antiquity. Every single culture has its mythology or lore about some blood-sucking corpse-like creature. Going back, way back into ancient Greece, Egypt, Asia, from the Penangalan, which is this female vampire with detached. Oh,
Yeah,
it's hideous. Uh,
Persians, Japan, China, all
yeah,
of
they all
those.
the hopping vampire. That's always fun.
Yep.
Uh, to what we consider vampires. Um, but what popular culture, well, not popular culture, it you envision as a vampire mostly spawns from uh, southern and eastern Europe. Um, Things like, it's epitomized by this one character, Vlad Tepes, who was a tyrant or a hero, depending upon your point of view, and other nobles like Elizabeth Bathory. She was a Hungarian countess and probably the most prolific female serial killer in history. Um, and but it was the 19th century where most vampiric lore, sort of all the various myths, got condensed into one uh, almost standard type of mythology. Uh, this most popularized by, of course, Bram Stoker's novel about Count Dracula, but also there was another novel called Camilla, which was a little earlier than that, about a female vampire. There was Penny Dreadfuls in the mid 18th century, of Varney the Vampire, and even up to 1892, there was the Mercy Brown of Rhode Island. There was a vampire incident there. I'm going to tell you about a little about that because it's really interesting. Um, there was a in the 19th century, they had they wrestled with something called consumption. Most of us think that's cancer, but it's actually tuberculosis. And on Rhode Island, there was an outbreak of it. And Mercy Brown, who was 19 at the time, died of it. So did her sisters, and I think her mother as well. And her brother was still alive afterwards. And so their corpses were exhumed, and the mother and the daughter, uh, Mercy's mother and daughter, they hadn't they showed normal signs of decay, but somehow Mercy didn't. There still was blood in her heart, and so they assumed she was a vampire because of it. Uh, they mutilated her body, burnt it into ashes, mixed it with water, and gave it to her brother as a tonic. And he died soon after because that's not healthy for you. But that's vampirism in modern in well almost modern times. They actually believed that up to the beginning of the 20th century, that if bad things happen, like a disease, it's a vampire.
Yep. Definitely. And I'm happy we've progressed in medicine that we don't drink those type of tonics.
You never know.
but
Some people still do some wacky stuff.
but the other interesting portion is pop culture, and Dracula by Bram Stoker really transitioned into the pop culture that we know today. With We started with the movie of Nosferatu in 1922. That was a copy at the time, a silent film of Bram Stoker's Dracula. But to this day, it's considered one of the foundation of the horror film. Yeah,
Genre.
genre. It is the keystone, and it's viewed with amazing awe for what the person was able to do at that time.
Yeah.
And we've progressed, and vampires in pop culture, and it's not just American pop culture, in Japanese pop culture, in Chinese pop culture. all of those where we have anime and all of that has progressed throughout, pretty much from 1922 with some sort of vampire films or stories. You have Anne Rice, you have Vampire Hunter D, which is one of the most predominant vampire story in anime.
Yeah.
And you can't discuss vampires without discussing Buffy. True, truly an amazing pop culture phenomenon that has developed and produced what we view about vampires today and understand. You are more likely to see a Buffy myth stated when asked, "What do you know about vampires?" than any of the other traditional items. So with that, we're taking a look at how vampires are used in Pathfinder 2e versus 5th edition, which is really important because in our view, the vampire can be such a key villain. He could be the main villain. He could be a sub-story villain. He can be the ongoing protagonist from first level all the way up to 20th level, and it's just an amazing thing that you can do. And the books, we're going to examine which ones and how they present the vampire, and which ones we'll give you our opinions on which one we believe is more in line with the traditional vampire and which one is more in line of how to make a really great villain in your campaign setting.
Yeah.
So I'll let you begin. Which edition would you like to describe the vampire? Fifth or?
I'll be consistent. You do the Pathfinder. I'll do the 5th edition.
Okay.
So the 5th edition vampire comes in two general flavors: the vampire spawn, which is sort of animalistic, what you think of as a freshly made vampire, a servant, a henchman, something that almost like a wandering monster type of thing. Not really that intelligent, not really that powerful, but it has a lot of different combat options available to it. It can regenerate so long as it's not exposed to radiant damage, I believe, or sunlight. It also can walk on. It has spider climb. It can, it has a lot of traditional vampire weaknesses. But it is when that begins as a CR5 creature. But it's one of its most key abilities is its bite, famous vampire bite. This one drains. This one does necrotic damage. Now, necrotic damage in 5th edition, it basically means I take hit points from you and I gain hit points. Basically, it's a transference, and you don't get those hit points. You don't get to heal those hit points back. You have to finish a long rest in order to gain those hit points back, which can be devastating in a long-running fight. For instance, if the vampire spawn, or even a vampire, hits you like once or a couple times in a combat and then flees, it'll regenerate back in a very short amount of time, whereas you are weakened. You can't heal that reduced necrotic damage easily, and then it attacks you again. It's one of those things where you have to be mindful of the tactics. If the thing is behaving intelligently, be scared. Be very scared. This one also can turn into a vampire, the higher level vampire, the ones that we assume like a Count Dracula type. This one's a CR13, and is definitely a boss character. This one has legendary saving throws, so it can make a saving throw even if it fails one, up to 3 times a day. Its regeneration now bumps to 20 hit points around, so long as there's no sunlight or running water. And it also has a powerful charm ability, and can summon Children of the Night, which are swarms of bats, rats, and other creepy crawlies. And it also has legendary actions as well. Nothing too outrageous, just an extra bite or an extra unarmed attack, or just the ability to move without provoking attacks of opportunity. So that's it for for my presentation. How about yours?
Yep. So the Pathfinder 2e has three sets of vampires. They also have the Vampire Spawn, they have the Vampire Count, and the Vampire Mastermind. So unlike the fifth edition, all of these are either the same or lower CR comparatively to the vampires in fifth edition. For example, and they progressively get more abilities. So the Spawn has all of the abilities except it can't turn into mist and it cannot shape change, which really makes it a weak. But it's also a CR4 creature. Mm. Whereas the Count now starts getting all of these abilities that you are more familiar with the type of vampire abilities of mist, dominating, switching into a bat, and the Mastermind getting the full range of abilities, as well as having spell casting abilities if you want to give it to them. Now, the very important part between the two is in both games, you can make vampire characters. They do give you the rules. And why is this important? Because you don't have to have a CR9 creature facing off 15th level characters. You can actually have a progressive vampire mastermind that's a 15th level spellcaster or a 15th level warrior who on top of it has vampire abilities. So therefore he is in line to fight a 15th level party. And you can do the same thing in 5th edition, which I think is very unique. So the vampire Count, which is in line with the CR6, which is also what the CR of the Vampire in the 5th edition is. That one, I think, is a little bit better, in my view, comparatively to the 5th edition Vampire.
Oh, yeah.
You know. But when you go into the Mastermind, the spellcasting abilities, I would say, probably counteract a little bit of the legendary abilities that the vampire, but still, the legendary abilities that you can start adding in 5th edition give that, I think, a way more edge, comparatively. I mean
yeah.
Do you agree?
I think if the Vampire Mastermind was adjusted to the same level as the Vampire in 5th edition in terms of CR, you might have even more additional abilities other than just simply increasing the attack bonuses, saving throws, hit points.
Right.
Any character that can cast spells obviously has an advantage, especially if you have distance. But at the same time, overcoming 3 legendary saving throws is a pain in the ass, especially if you're.
Yeah.
But this is not about them fighting. It's how effective is it against a character party.
Right.
The vampire in the boss level vampire, the CR13 in 5th edition, that is definitely more a physical threat with some situational abilities and charming abilities thrown in. Definitely again, like a boss character, a boss, final boss type of thing, but also a manipulator and almost a seducer if you want to, as well. It can turn party member against each other very easily. The Vampire Mastermind here, again, it has a lot of illusion-based spells, has charming ability. Anytime you have something with illusion, dispel magic, that type of thing, invisibility, mirror image, touch of idiocy, all sorts of wonderful spells that can mess up a party, and never has to just simply, oh hey, I'm the bad guy, let's fight. That's kind of a boring character. You can play all those things to the vampire's strengths, obviously.
Yeah.
Both of them can play incredibly well, like in a castle where the vampire has the home field advantage. Just to borrow from another game, Vampire the Masquerade. Remember the La Sombra clan?
Yeah.
they couldn't their weakness, clan weakness was they couldn't be seen in mirrors, right? They
Right.
they, they use shadow power, but the price of that is that they
Right.
couldn't be mirrors. Now that could obviously have a little some psychological problems for the vampire over time, especially if they were vain before that. But they included in a passageway, sorry, in a passage, I think it was in the Clan La Sombra thing, um, a tactic of mirrors, where in the long hallways, the La Sombra, whoever the Lord was, had mirrors, had angles. So he can't see himself, but he can certainly see other people. All he has to do is look down one mirror, and he can see all the, the passageway. He can see
Yep.
intruders. Else, just as a heads up. I mean, add some traps to that, and a couple of minions here and there, and you've got one hell of a fun time.
Right. And the vampires don't appear in mirrors in both books,
Yeah,
so that's definitely a great tactic. The only portion they do view mirrors as
repugnant.
uh,
Yeah,
repugnant, but
yeah,
it's not as bad, especially in the fifth edition. You can overcome it with a reasonable DC save.
yeah. I've one of the things I've always liked, regardless of which edition, just the whole vampire lore is they have such a wide um, number of abilities, special abilities. And if you, as any GM out there, DM, um, when you put a vampire encounter when the vampire is the main villain, you've got to properly utilize these abilities because it gives you such a tremendous arsenal against the players, not just to kill them, but to
Right.
mess with them. Just having the ability of the ability to charm at will or dominate at will is such
Right.
a tremendous game changer in any encounter. You don't even have to. It doesn't even have to be in the actual combat. It could be like, hey, you're in this forest area and there's all sorts of things going on, and then suddenly one of you attack him from like a distance, or maybe he starts. I mean, there's nothing against a vampire being invisible or improved
Right.
invisible, and they can just simply appear, uh, charm one of the persons, and then disappear again, and then leave that as a fifth column, if you would, when they
Right.
actually do fight something. So suddenly, oh, I'm dying, and I'm getting beat up in the front, but your healer's like, well, so what? That's not gonna
Yep.
mean. You figure
Yep.
out eventually that there's the healer that's is the traitor or the one who's charmed, or worse yet, is the one that joins his side, the wrong side. Oh, hey, this guy's my friend. Blah blah blah.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
So let's move to which of the two sets of vampires do you think is more in line? Let's go with what you would view as a vampire.
All right. I think the more formidable vampire, despite the fact that they're different CRs, is the one from Pathfinder. The the Mastermind account. The problem with that is the count here is only a CR6, and the Mastermind is a CR9. But you can still make adjustments to whatever level you need them to be. So
Right.
that's not the real point. The vampire count appears to be more of a melee monster. It's stronger. It does more damage per attack. It doesn't have as many
Yes.
spell components. And Mastermind's obviously the reverse of that. So it gives you the option of what you want, what type of monster you want to play, what type of boss you want to
Yep.
improve them with. Um,
Yep.
I think in terms of abilities, the drink blood ability of the Pathfinder just is somewhat better because of the mechanism is slightly different, but it's essentially the fifth edition is necrotic damage. You take damage, I get healed, and you don't get the
Right.
heal until you take a long rest. Okay. Whereas in Pathfinder, it's the drained condition,
Yep.
where you get drained 1, 2, whatever it is, and the vampire gets a small amount of hit points. But this is what ekes it out from the fifth edition, the Pathfinder second edition over the D&D. For the Pathfinder, you have to wait a full week, 1 week, to get rid of the drain condition.
Right.
One drain condition. Whereas normally the condition of drain, you have to wait 1 day. But this is like one whole week. And you can circumvent that with a DC 20 medicine check. However, you have to have available blood. Time to roll those random dice to see what blood type you have.
Yep, definitely.
Now I'm thinking of a scenario, not for a future scenario.
Yeah. Yep. So I agree. The vampire in the Pathfinder is more in line to what I would consider a vampire, and it's a much better design for an ongoing villain, if that's what you're looking for, and even a really critical villain for a sort of a 1 game, 2 game type of side arc, if you want to do that. That's important. Yep. So definitely. So before we end, I would like to say the key aspects to the vampire and why it's such a great villain is because that you just don't kill it by reducing it to 0 hit points. There's also this other aspect of, even when you reduce it to 0 hit points, there's now the hunt. Can you get to its coffin before it regenerates, right? Yeah. So it adds the value. And then stake it and cut off its head. Unless, of course, you're in Ravenloft and you're dealing with a gnome vampire, which you can't just stake it. You can't just stake it and cut off its head.
Whoever thought of that must have been smoking some amazing weed or something. I don't know.
Yeah. So the way you kill a gnome vampire is you have to stake it with a golden stake and then immerse it in melted gold, and only then does it die.
It was such a no player party at worth itself would ever try and kill any of those things, because they're like, it costs how much to kill those things? Because some of them required like gems that you lost.
Right. Yeah.
Silver spikes, and they're like, what? I'm not paying this to kill this thing. It's more expensive.
It's not worth it. Let it kill all the little town. Who cares?
You're on your own. Bye.
Actually, it's cheaper to move the village to a different area than to kill the gnome vampire.
Those vampires were there was no way that anybody could figure it out. It was just like so specific, and like, really? I read those way back in the 90s, and thinking, wait a minute, this is like absolute. This is from Ravenloft, by the way. Yeah. With the demi vampires. But good times.
Yes. So that's your vampire. Please let us know what you think about it. Subscribe, give us a like, leave a message. Tell us some adventures you had with a vampire where it wasn't easy to kill, or you needed to embed it in gold that was worth more than all the magic items you had. So thank you very much. This is Boredom Satan. We'll see you next time.